Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We're kicking off with a story that starts with non-stop ceiling banging and ends with the most satisfying little dose of silent revenge. One neighbor pushed too far, and the other finally decided to get creative. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. How to handle a noisy neighbor without saying a word. Had a neighbor downstairs, we'll call him Steve. When Steve moved in, he was constantly banging for weeks. I thought he was hanging stuff or something. I didn't care a whole lot until about week 4 when I got up from my computer desk and walked across the apartment to use the bathroom, and he banged aggressively against the ceiling that I realized he was banging whenever I walked around. I usually had a headset for work or was on computer with friends frequently, so it was easy to not always catch the banging. Now, I'm not a small guy by any means, but I genuinely tried to walk as softly/quietly as possible to be a considerate neighbor. A couple lived down there previously and moved out 6 months after I moved in, but were always friendly, but never hinted that I was loud, or I would have happily tried to work something out. Now that I knew Steve was banging whenever I walked, I spent a week confirming my theory. He banged every time I walked across the apartment. I tried to address it outside. At the time, I had 2 dogs. My younger boy was 5 and my older boy was 18. He had arthritis and cataracts, but was happy otherwise, and I happily carried him up and down the stairs. While I was walking the old man, I saw Steve come out, and I politely asked if he could stop banging, to which he curtly replied, "I have to listen to you stomp around day and night," which caught me off guard. I asked, "You mean walking across my apartment?" And he said nothing and just kept walking, but held the door open for me when I carried my dog in. I thought we were square somehow, but the banging continued. After about 4 to 5 weeks, I tried addressing the situation a few times, got aggressive responses. I eventually raised my voice a few times as well, but hated it was coming to that, so I reached out to the property manager asking what could be done about the situation because I didn't know what else to do. She took my email as a noise complaint against Steve, who turned around and said both of my dogs bark constantly day and night and pee up and down the stairs. Mind you, I carried the old guy, so he'd pee on me if anything, and hadn't barked in about 4 years. But I was furious that he would involve my dogs in this. So one day I came home on my lunch break, knowing very well Steve was never home during the day and didn't come home. I scraped a bit of lint from the inside of one of my hoodies and went down to his door and used my key to just shove enough lint into his lock that when you put the key in, it was millimeters from going in all the way, but it wouldn't budge. I came back to the maintenance guy going in through the kitchen window, who said the guy blew up on him and the property manager before leaving, and how much neither of them liked Steve. The banging stopped for quite a while after that. Steve's own toxic personality solved the problem for our OP. When Steve blew up on the maintenance guy and the property manager, he showed them his true colors. They already didn't like him, and now they saw he was the problem. The system that Steve tried to weaponize against our OP ended up validating him. And our second story. My disability isn't up for public debate, but that didn't stop 2 separate seniors from trying. Before I got my electric wheelchair, I relied on the mobility carts at the grocery store. They weren't perfect, but they kept me from collapsing after 10 steps, literally. I'm 55, and between my back, knees, circulation issues, and everything else my body has decided to betray me with, walking more than a few feet means serious pain and sometimes nearly passing out. So on this particular day, my daughter and I were doing our normal routine. I was riding the mobility cart, and she was pushing the shopping cart right beside me. We're minding our own business when this older man, easily late 70s, marches right up to me and tells me to give him the scooter because, and I quote, "You're young, you can walk." I just stared at him for a second. My daughter went stiff, like she was ready to swing a gallon of milk at him. So very calmly, I asked him if he had any disabilities besides being old. He said no. So I told him again, politely, that I'd gladly trade places with him if he wanted. If he wants chronic pain so intense I measure grocery trips in survival mode. If he wants to live in a body that forces mobility aids on him like handcuffs. If he wants to be exhausted from 10 steps, be my guest. But until then, maybe don't assume anything about strangers and maybe, just maybe, keep his mouth shut. He huffed and stormed off like I denied him his inheritance. And that wasn't even the only time an elderly entitled popped off at me. Another day at Sam's Club, my daughter ran inside to get one of their scooters for me. On top of all my usual issues, I'd recently fractured 5 bones in my right foot, so I was wearing one of those giant, heavy walking boots. She brings the scooter out, and as I'm carefully trying to get into it, this older lady gets out of the car next to us and immediately starts talking to me. She goes on about how she has knee problems and her doctor told her not to walk, but she's choosing to walk anyway. Then she glances down at my big black medical boot and, with her whole chest, says that if she were me, she'd just walk around with it on. Then she strolls right past us like she just delivered some sage wisdom. I looked at my daughter and said loudly, "Was she trying to disability shame me just now?" My daughter rolled her eyes and said she's ignorant. If she wants to ignore her doctor, that's her problem. Doesn't mean she gets to shame other people. That lady must have heard us because she whipped around and gave us the dirtiest look, like we were the rude ones. I'm telling you, the entitlement some people carry around is unreal. And the elderly love to weaponize age like it's a personality trait. Yes, you're old. Congratulations. If you've been on this earth long enough to remember when dinosaurs roamed suburbia, you're definitely old enough to have learned basic manners by now. But apparently some people skip that chapter entirely. And I absolutely love that our storyteller and her daughter called it what it was, disability shaming. They named the behavior. And, of course, the woman got offended because people who dish out unsolicited judgmental advice are never prepared to be told they're being rude. They think they're being helpful or superior. And our last story. They called me selfish for not sacrificing my property. I showed them what selfish really looks like by closing my wallet. When my wife and I bought our new house, it felt like we'd finally landed the place we'd been saving for. It sat higher off the ground than most houses in the neighborhood, with a tiered front garden that immediately stole my wife's heart. She's a dedicated gardener, the kind who knows every plant by its Latin name, and the garden was a huge part of why we chose this house over another contender. A few days after we closed, my sister stopped by to see the place. She barely finished her tour before asking, "So when would you like Mark to install the ramp?" Mark's her husband. He works in construction and built a ramp at our old home so our nephew, who uses a wheelchair, could come over and hang out with our kids. He'd also built one at my brother's house for the same reason. Making sure her son feels welcome is extremely important to my sister, and normally I'd agree without hesitation. But the second she asked, my stomach already knew the answer wasn't going to be simple. We walked outside, looked at the front entrance. The house sits high enough that a standard ADA-compliant ramp would have to be very long enough that it would swallow almost the entire tiered garden. When Mark measured everything, he confirmed it. If we built a front ramp, the garden would be gone. My wife looked devastated just hearing it. She didn't say anything, but the way she wrapped her arms around herself told the story. "There's always the side door," I said, trying to offer something. "But the side door opens directly onto the driveway. To make room for a ramp there, we'd have to narrow the driveway so much that half our parking would be unusable. Street parking's basically non-existent in our area, so losing driveway space isn't just inconvenient, it's a problem. And it would prevent me from storing my classic muscle car in the garage, which was one of the reasons I wanted this house in the first place." We took all the measurements, double-checked the angles, tried every workaround we could think of. The numbers always came out the same. A ramp meant sacrificing either the garden or the driveway. When I explained all this to my sister, she stared at me like I'd confessed to a crime. "You're choosing plants over my son's ability to get inside your home?" she said sharply. "I'm choosing not to bulldoze half the property we just bought," I replied. "And you know it's not just plants. We literally can't build a ramp without losing major features." She ignored that. "The garden is cosmetic. You're telling me a cosmetic issue is more important than my son feeling included?" It didn't matter how calmly I tried to explain the logistical constraints. She'd already decided the problem was personal, not structural. My mom got involved next, followed by 2 cousins, and suddenly the whole family had an opinion. My nephew's always been welcome in my home, and always will be, but the house itself physically cannot accommodate the ramp without a major alteration. That wasn't enough for them. My brother weighed in too, "So now I have to host every big holiday," he said. "That's not fair." I reminded him that summer gatherings could be outside at our place. The backyard is large, shaded, and we could set it up comfortably. The garage bathroom's accessible, and the patio area is flat. It seemed reasonable. They all shot that down immediately. It'll be too hot, my sister said. Everyone's going to want to go inside, and when they do, he'll be left outside feeling excluded. So your solution, I said slowly, is for me to tear down part of my property so everyone else can use the air conditioning? She folded her arms. It's about family, and you're making it about convenience. It was one of those conversations where no amount of logic could break through. They weren't looking for solutions. They were looking for a villain. After a week of nonstop guilt tripping and pointed comments about priorities, I finally stopped responding to the group chat. I don't feel guilty about protecting the home my wife and I worked for, but I did start to feel something else. Tired of being painted as heartless because my house wasn't built in a way that matched their expectations. The final conversation happened when my sister showed up unannounced. She started with, "Have you reconsidered?" and ended with, "I can't believe you're doing this to your own nephew." I told her firmly, I'm not tearing down the garden, I'm not blocking off the driveway, and I'm not redesigning the house. You can accept our outdoor gatherings or host the holidays yourself. She left in tears, but I didn't back down. A few days later, my brother called again, this time furious. "You know what?" he snapped. "If you won't make your house accessible, then don't expect us to show up there at all." I almost laughed. "That's fine," I said, "but in that case, I'll stop paying for the holiday catering and decorations you always ask me to split." He went silent. And just like that, the family outrage faded. Funny how fast the guilt trips dry up when the wallet closes. Silence, this is the core of it. So often the people who demand the most, who guilt trip the hardest, are the same people who are deeply invested in the status quo that benefits them. The moment you threaten to withdraw your contribution, whether it's money, labor, or simply your presence, the moral high ground suddenly becomes a lot less comfortable to stand on. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.